Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending TPC Training's webinar series. Today, we're going to talk about the value of a blended curriculum. In the past, in a lot of our trainings and webinars, we've talked about topics that have been directed at the end-line workers, things like PLCs and VFDs and electrical safety and things of that nature. But today, we wanted to sort of target this topic to the folks that are actually working on trying to train the attendees in their given facilities. And so that's what our focus is going to be on today. A couple of housekeeping items. First of all, one of the most popular questions we always get is, can I get a copy of the presentation? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. All of your registration materials for this webinar had an email address that will come to me. So simply respond to that email address if you want a copy of any of the presentation materials, and I'll be happy to get that out to you. Also, we are recording the broadcast today, so if you need a copy of that or a link to that to share with other people, please let us know, and we'll be happy to get that to you as well. Second, we do have a question and answer session at the end. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a little icon that says Q&A. Simply type in a question to that, and at the end of the broadcast, Ryan will answer your questions that you do have. And lastly, at the conclusion of the webinar, a survey will launch. Please, if you don't mind, it's only 3 questions. Take some time to answer that survey. It helps us develop topics that are of interest to our customers, but also allow us to create the best possible product for you as well. So without further ado, I'd like to formally introduce our speaker today, Mr. Ryan Smith. Ryan?
Thank you so much, John. Looking forward to talking to you guys today all about the value of blended curriculum, mixing online, self-guided online courses with the typical and classic instructor-led training courses to really maximize learning results in your facility. So that's our goal today in this session now. I kind of want to play this out in a few different scenarios, and then also, once we play out these different scenarios, I want to see what scenario you guys have in your facility as well. So we're all in different types of facilities, whether it be commercial or industrial facilities here in our workplace. Now, I want to really start this session. Here's kind of the layout of what I plan to talk about over the next hour. I want to start this session here by talking about how the evolution of workplace learning has happened over the years, and really just to give you an idea of maybe you'll fit into some of these scenarios of how workplace learning evolves in your facility. Then I want to talk really about how to blend these different evolutions of workplace learning together as a overall cohesive package of learning for your employees and for your learners in your facility. There is benefits to doing what we call the blended learning approach, and I want to chat about those that are a result of actual research being done in the learning and development field here. For those of you who may have heard of the ATD conference, the Association for Talent Development, they have a big conference every year where people who are doing learning and development across this country come together and meet. So there's a lot of research being done across this country every year on what's the best way we can let our people learn in the facilities that we have. And this is really one of those main ways. Blended learning. And then in kind of a way to apply the blended learning approach, we're going to talk about building a qualified worker program in your facility. And in doing so, building what we call curriculum paths using the blended learning approaches. So we'll provide a couple sample blended learning paths in this session: qualified electrical workers, HVAC technicians, maintenance managers, and mechanical system technicians. There's plenty more where that comes from, but kind of just starting with these 4 just for our discussion here in this webinar. So let's talk about how workplace learning evolves and maybe comes to be, just maybe a little fun discussion piece for us all. So let's say you are working in a industrial facility, whether you're making car parts or whether you're making some manufactured products, whether you're doing some material recycling, whether you're maybe running a commercial operation with a bunch of office space, or people trying to get their work done. Whatever that might be, I can imagine that day in and day out, week in and week out, year in and year out, you're going to experience issues right at your facility that are related to people's learning and people's development and knowledge in the facility. What we find time and time again is the value of training, showing its showing its face and showing its value in all parts of your business. So really these issues that end up coming up your facility, for instance, downtime, right? Even 15 minutes or maybe even 1 hour of downtime in a manufacturing facility can really result in some serious costs. Also, there are costs associated with safety incidences. So let's say one of these issues that are happening in your facility are issues of safety, people getting themselves hurt, people having to send themselves to the clinic. Now, how do companies usually respond to this, and how can companies respond to this? There's all sorts of different ways, doing incident management, doing incident reporting, having internal meetings to correct these issues, but also pursuing training is one of the best ways to get sustainable growth in your employees and sustainable reduction in downtime and safety incidences, for instance, and more efficiency in your facility. So what's one way to get that training? Well, you can invite those experts and those trainers and those instructors into your facility, just like we see here. And you get everyone to come in, maybe instead of going to their shift on the floor one day, they're going to come into the training room in the corner of your facility, and then you're going to learn from the instructor on site. Maybe you'll spend 4 hours, maybe you'll spend 8 hours, maybe you'll spend 2 days or 4 days with that instructor learning that topic that is applicable to everyone in your department, whether it be, production related, maintenance related, shipping related, or workplace skills related. Or you might opt to hop on a plane, right? And instead of being inside your facility and with all the distractions there, maybe you want to get some real high quality learning and take that plane over somewhere in another city, in another part of the country, or another part of the world even. Go to a training center or a hotel or some public space and get what you call public training. Now, this type of training has its own type of benefits and its own type of ways of learning as well. What this differs from on-site training with the instructor is that you're not with your coworkers anymore. You might be solo, or maybe with one of your coworkers joined on this trip, but you'll be in the room with people of all walks of life and all types of businesses doing their lines of work as well. So you can learn from people around you and learn from people in similar industries dealing with similar issues, and really be able to share those ideas with those people in this kind of once in a lifetime way of meeting these people face to face and learning from them, as well as the instructor. So this is all what we call instructor-led training, whether it be on-site or public training. This is the classic, right? This is the time-tested and approved method of getting knowledge to your employees. You learn directly from that expert, or what we call the subject matter expert in a lot of cases. And in the best versions of instructor-led training, you're interacting with that instructor. You are discussing, you're sharing ideas, you're doing hands-on activities, right? And in many cases, these training courses offer you equipment where you can actually learn hands-on skills with the training equipment in a comfortable and in a conducive working and learning environment where you feel comfortable asking your questions, right? When you're in a loud machine environment, it's a little bit more difficult to ask your questions. It's a little bit more difficult to maybe learn, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I connecting these wires together right now? I know I just have to do it to get the job done. But in certain cases, you find that sitting in the classroom in a quieter environment, even in these heavily production and maintenance oriented facilities, will result in some increased learning. Now, the issue is, and you can see up at our factory up on the upper left, as issues continue to happen, right? And here's the downside to instructor-led training, right? You're off-site, you're in, San Diego, California, getting a public training, but all the while your facility is experiencing more and more issues, right? They're still having downtime. They're still having issues where now you're one of the critical, let's say, maintenance or production technicians. Maybe you're the safety manager. They're calling you during the training, and you have to answer those phone calls. So a lot of companies end up finding themselves hesitant to let their people leave for 2 to 4 days for training, which is a typical length of a training session to get really good amounts of learning done. So yes, you're getting high quality. Yes, you're interacting. Yes, you're learning directly from that expert, but it is a multi-day commitment, which in these highly dynamic facilities can cause an issue. So over the years and over the last couple decades or so, we've seen an evolution from this style of training where we start over. We're at a facility. We're having issues with again, whether it comes to safety or from downtime related issues. And instead, you take your learners, you have them continue to work on their shift, but maybe just for an hour of their shift, or maybe for the last half hour of their shift. You bring them into the computer lab or to one of the office spaces, and you have them do some self-guided computer-based training. And self-guided online computer-based training is really a wonderful alternative, and what I would say is a wonderful reinforcement of instructor-led training. And this is because online learning is a less continuous time commitment for us. A less continuous time commitment, by that I mean these courses online can definitely last up to 8 hours or more per course, because there's a lot of info we got to learn, let's say as electricians or maintenance people, to learn the ins and outs of all these machines. However, you don't have to learn it all at once, right? You can't really sit with an instructor for 10 minutes and then come back the next week and sit with that instructor for 10 more minutes. But in the case of online training, it'll always be there ready for you to learn the next step of that process on your own time. So you can take these lessons before or after your shift, and that ends up being a much more practical solution for many of the training industry people in this world. Reinforcing what you learn during that instructor-led training becomes really important. And the key here is that you can go at your own pace during online training. You take one small module or one small chunk at a time. And like they say, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So you can just get everything slowly built upon itself time and time again, day after day. And what's really great about online training in today's day and age is that it's not just you click through, let's say, a slide presentation, but this comes with tracked metrics. So these come as part of what we call an overall learning management system, or what we call an LMS in the training industry. I'm sure many of you are starting to get into the idea of using a learning management system for yourself. This is the 21st century way of learning, by, let's say, assigning certain online modules and certain instructor-led classes to an individual person, so that, let's say, they take 3 online courses, and then they start taking instructor-led courses to go along with that. Now, this is where it really starts getting into the blended learning approach, and we're going to start talking about how that works in just a little bit. But on the topic of online training, you can track the metrics of how far they are through the training, how they did on those assessment tests at the end of each training module, which ones you want them to complete before which other ones. So there's all sorts of different ways you can assign badges and accomplishments to your employees to really let them know where they are along their progression of learning. So online learning is a very modular and easy to use way of getting learning as an alternative to instructor-led training. But there's more, and we hear it time and time again that those people working in this facility and experiencing those same issues, right? They learn best when their hands are on the equipment and they're actually learning on the job. And on-the-job training is the most valid, and studies show that it's also the most effective way to learn, right? When you learn by doing, you get the most effective learning as possible. So what if we had these issues, right? These red exclamation points showing up in our facility, but instead of going into the classroom, we take these issues out on the manufacturing floor, and we actually learn directly about how to deal with them directly from a mentor who's been doing this job for, the last 10 years, let's say. And they're going to show you hands-on what this process is all about, and how to, let's say, properly start up your machine, how to properly deal with this common issue you're seeing on your machine, how to deal with this common workplace issue that, many people before you have dealt with. This is on-the-job training. This is an extremely effective and powerful part of your training journey anytime you're trying to learn a new job, whether it be technical or non-technical job, is learning it on the job, exactly how it will be, right? A lot of us, I'm sure myself included, but anyone on this call can attest to the fact that sometimes you're thrown directly into on-the-job training instead of getting a chance to be in the classroom and ask questions. And maybe you can also attest how stressful that can be, is kind of thrown to the wolves or thrown to the fire right away. Definitely you learn fast, but you can also potentially be in danger of learning the wrong way of doing things if you're not careful of understanding kind of why these things happen. Now, on-the-job training, right? This can take all sorts of formats, but I'm going to challenge one of the common notions of on-the-job training, and that is that on-the-job training must be documented for it to be a valid form of on-the-job training. Now, I want you to kind of think about this concept here, which we're showing. No tribal knowledge, right? Maybe a few of you know what I'm talking about with this, but let me describe what tribal knowledge is all about. So basically, this is someone saying, all right, come follow me. I'm going to do this job, right? You watch me do this job. Okay, now you do the job, right? And then, oh, by the way, this valve, I just turn it, halfway in this direction, and that's just how I learned to get over the issue, and you do it too, right? And it's kind of, they're little tricks of the trade that they're showing you on the job, very valuable for your job, and you're learning it and you're memorizing it. But that stuff was never written down. And you know what? If that mentor who's showing you around ends up, getting another job or moving to another facility, that knowledge goes out the door with that person. So the idea of tribal knowledge is highly discouraged from a training standpoint, because you never really know what you learn in the process of tribal knowledge, and you never can really go back and review what you learned with tribal knowledge. So documented on-the-job training really takes the form of checklists, job checklists, where you can actually go from job task to job task and show what's expected of you on that job. And then for each task, you can be introduced to that task and signed off that you've been introduced on that task, that you've started practicing that task, right, with supervision from your mentor, and then finally that you've learned and have mastered that task, and your mentor can attest to the fact that you've mentored that task, and you each sign off or initial each of those tasks as part of your on-the-job training. This becomes a very valuable part of on-the-job training. And as we all know, we have to learn our standard SOPs, the standard operating procedures. Maybe it'll take the form of JSAs, our job safety analysis, where we go through each step of the job and what can go wrong and how to deal with it. Job hazard analysis, very similar, how to reduce risk. Looking at our schematics of our machines, right? And maybe loading them onto, into a notebook or into a mobile tablet for us to view at any time for our on-the-job training. Understanding the process flows of our machines. These are all documented ways to facilitate on-the-job training. Know, do, verify. That's kind of the method I just described to you guys, of being introduced something, practicing that something, and then verifying that you can do it. Having a trusted trainer and mentor really makes or breaks on the job training. So having those trusted, experienced machine operators or maintenance techs or co-workers in your facility make all the difference. So we've seen some instructor-led training, right? That's one format. We've seen some self-guided online training. That's another great format. We see on-the-job training, which is another great format. And I hope you guys see that this should maybe not be the only format, but definitely one of the main formats, right? But are there other forms of learning that are coming around, right, over the next 21st century? And I think there definitely are, especially on the horizon is what this guy is experiencing, right? Training in a virtual reality environment. Right? Thanks to all sorts of different rigs and setups that have been set up over the last couple years or so, there are all sorts of really, really cool ways to do our almost like on-the-job learning, but without having to be faced with the dangers of that on-the-job learning. Let's say electrical hazards or mechanical rotating equipment hazards, where you can do this kind of electrical work virtually, and you get that experience of using the meter or using the tool to test your equipment or work on your equipment, but in a way that if you make a mistake, it'll tell you, and maybe it'll tell you how serious your mistake is, but you actually won't get yourself hurt. And so this is a really great value-added way of potential future learning in many of our facilities. Definitely not many people are in this space yet, but it's definitely a place that's growing year after year, the form of virtual reality training. So what do we find, right? All these forms of training, instructor-led training, self-guided online training, on-the-job training, and maybe even some virtual simulation training can all come together as an overall package of training for people in your facility, right? Not everyone learns best sitting in a chair for 8 hours, right? Not everyone learns best by having to listen in a loud environment, trying to hear what the machine operator is trying to tell them during on-the-job training. Not many people have, are computer savvy nowadays to really get through online self-guided training. So really, there's all sorts of different ways we learn. So this blended learning approach really makes or breaks people's learning journeys in your facility. Employers can create their own version of this. There's no one right way to do blended learning, and that's really going to be the key here. But what I'd like to ask you all is, which of these do you have in your facility? Which of these are you employing to your employees in your facility? So I'm going to launch a poll here, and so you're going to see a little window show up right now asking you a question. And I want you to select all that apply on this question. Do you employ instructor-led training? Do you employ self-guided training? Documented on-the-job training? So again, tribal knowledge doesn't count here. Do you employ simulations for your folks? Or do your coworkers employ these things? Select all that apply. And if you're not using any of these things right now, say none of the above. And that's perfectly valid as well. Getting some great results coming in. Love this. This is really cool. Yep, the bars are fluctuating. You might be curious to see where all the responses are coming in from. Give you guys just a couple more seconds to put your answers in here. Just click whichever answer or answers, multiple answers apply to you. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's end that poll, and I'll share all the results with you. At the very last second, we got a dead heat for instructor-led training and self-guided online training being used in your facilities today. And that is not surprising to me. Those are the two primary methods of getting introductory learning in place, right? That first exposure to high-quality knowledge, whether you sit down in the classroom or whether you're spending time on the computer to do this at your own pace. I saw self-guided online training jump to the front of the pack at the beginning of this poll, and then it kind of made its way down as instructor-led training continued to be there. So in today's day and age, online training is only going to grow using technology to our advantage, right, for learning. Instructor-led training is not going to go away almost ever. At the end of the day, you still got to learn from another human being on why we do things, why we should care about doing things, what's more important than any other thing in your facility. So that human touch is always going to be a part of any good training program. And it looks like some of us are getting into the business of documented on-the-job training, and I'm really happy to hear that. And even some people are cracking into some simulations, and I'm definitely always curious about those as well. So I'm going to pull this down. I'll ask you another question here. Okay. My question for you next, just out of curiosity, is, and we can only select one answer this time, is how do you meet your needs for training? So if you're doing instructor-led training or self-guided online training, right, are you doing this training in-house, or are you relying on a third-party training company to provide this training for you? Or are you doing a little bit of both, right? Or none of the above? I'd really like to know, how do you rely on, or who do you rely on to get your training done in your facility? If you're thinking, electrical arc flash training, or maybe, machine operator skills, right? Or maybe harassment, harassment skills, or bloodborne pathogens, or safety, right? Lockout, tag out, this kind of stuff. How are you doing this training today? All right, I think we got a good consensus here. And we're doing a little bit of both, aren't we? So that is the predominant answer, and I love to hear that on the line, because people need some third-party training companies with their wealth of information that they have collected over the years, and they're experts in putting this in a very easy-to-learn format, what we call instructional design, for you. So you can just take it right off the shelf and teach your people, whether it be through an online course or they also have the instructors that you need, and you don't have to go find them, right? But at the end of the day, there are certain things you can only teach in-house. How do you work on your very specific machines that only you have, that might even be proprietary to you? So in-house training always tends to be part of the equation too. So having kind of that blend of both in-house and third-party training is smart for any company to do. Excellent. So I'll ask you one more question here in just a little bit, but for now I'll stop those results and I will take us to the next level here. So what are the benefits of blending approaches, of having both online training and on-the-job training and instructor-led training? The reality is, guys, we're in a world full of all sorts of different types of people who learn in all sorts of different types of ways. And that's actually a beautiful thing, a wonderful thing to have, is not only someone who's going to think differently than you in the workplace and actually provide maybe fresh new ideas on ways to make things better, but also having different viewpoints in your facility, right, can have huge benefits of learning, right? People learn in different ways, whether it be visual, right? They need to see what's going on. Let's see, pictures and animations, right? Movies, instructional videos, that kind of thing. Logical, right? They want to solve problems. They want to see a problem and try to solve it for themselves. Verbal, they actually want to talk it out. Talking about things is remarkable on how things can illuminate in your head if you just talk it out, right? So people who want to collaborate, do group work. Physical, right? A lot of us in the maintenance trade are physical, hands-on learners, right? They're tactile, we call it. They want to have their hands on something, take it apart, put it back together again. Oral, which is through the ears, right? So auditory, hearing someone talk about it, listening to podcasts, listening to instructions, that kind of thing. That's oral. And then this kind of mixes back and forth between social methods of learning through other people, versus solitary, learning for just yourself. And everyone learns in all sorts of different ways. And you can kind of see where each of these learning modes that we talked about fit into each of these categories. Visual, logical, oral, right? The self-guided online training fits into all those. Social, right? Social learning, that's where instructor-led training really plays into that, where you can have interactions and group work and discussions back and forth across the classroom. Solitary, right? You're more solitary on self-guided online training for people who need to learn in their own pace, in their own way. Mixing these styles of learning together into a comprehensive blended package, right, in your facility can only increase the speed of knowledge gain in your facility, increase the productivity in your facility, and increase, quite literally, the profitability in your facility, because these people are learning much quicker, because the learning is diversified to the point where anyone from any walk of life can learn at the best pace for them. And research has shown over the years, since the last couple decades, that people have started to use blended learning since the advent of the internet and computers, that not only does blended learning result in a higher completion rate of training, mainly because people are more interested in what you're giving to them. It's not boring, it's more valued, it's more varied, right? You're decreasing the time it takes to cover and master a given topic. And I'm going to show how that can be true on the next part of this. Third, you're reducing your overall cost of educating your people, because you don't have to send, let's say, 100 people off-site to San Diego to get a training session, for instance, right? You can have different methods that can actually reduce the cost of training and also reduce the time it's going to take to train them. And then finally, better learning outcomes than just one learning method alone, because one person who learns visually will learn differently than one person who learns hands-on, okay? And here's one really interesting concept that brings us to the idea of how learning can happen quicker and how learning can happen more effectively using blended learning approaches. And this is what we call the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. This is something that us in the learning industry have to deal with all the time, especially on the instructor-led side. And that is this blue curve here we see, and I'll have my little arrow here. This curve represents the second that the learner walks out of the classroom with the instructor, right? And then here's the blue line represents their level of knowledge and recollection, their memory of what was taught to them. And unfortunately, even just one day after the class is over, much of that information has gone out the other ear, so to speak, of that learner. And by the time 5, 6, 7 days after the training have gone by, with all the other stuff that person has going on in their mind and preoccupying them, they have learned virtually just a small percentage of what that instructor has had to offer, right? So what's been proven as a more sustainable way of having our learning happen is the idea of what we call boostering, or reinforcement of that learning, where that person's knowledge and memory of what was taught to them is starting to drop, right? Then at a critical time after their training, maybe 1 day, maybe 2 days, whatever you guys set, you get a booster event. And what would that booster event look like? This is a perfect opportunity for self-guided online training. Think of it this way. You go to a classroom, you go back and talk to your supervisor, let's say, and say, here's what I learned in this class, and da-da-da. And then you're talking about what you learned, you're talking about the benefits you got in the class, and then you say, all right, take this online module to really review what you learned in the class, right? And then you'll take, let's say, an hour long or maybe even 15-minute long, just little module, and that'll reinforce what you learned in the class. And then maybe a week later, you'll take another one. And each time you repeat, each time you reinforce that information, the person, you can see, doesn't lose as much. Actually, more sticks around for a longer period of time in that person's memory. And that's really what the idea of boosting and reinforcement of your instructor-led and online training is all about. And so because of this, blended learning has been proven to be just much more effective for our learning. Putting it another way, this represents the journey on learning that a typical person might take. They start, right? Let's say you have a new technician that's just starting in your facility for the first day, and they're right out of, let's say, trade school, or they're right out of even high school. They haven't developed those skills yet on the job. So it's time for them to start from scratch and get some of those core concepts down, the core ideas behind what they're doing in their profession. This learning, what we call the learning of why we do things and the reason we do things, that all starts usually in the classroom, right? Classroom is a great way to start off that learning. The core concepts, what is physics? What is math? How to use math in the right way, how to use measuring tape, how to use a wrench, how to use a hammer, all these kind of basic skills, how to solve problems, right? How to talk to people, how to communicate with people, all these really basic skills that you can build using online or self-guided training or instructor-led training. Then applying those skills is the next big thing. And I'm pretty sure you can all see that on-the-job training is a really great way to apply those skills. All right, you've learned these great things in the classroom. Now let's get out on the floor with a trusted mentor, and we're going to learn to apply those skills in the workplace. And again, don't just throw them to the wolves, so to speak. They need a documented way of doing that, right? And then finally, as they continue to, let's say after year 2 of being on the job, maybe certain concepts of getting fuzzy, reinforcement, taking an online module, taking a short refresher class the next year or 2 years or 3 years later is required. In fact, it's so useful for our learning that the National Electrical Code and the NFPA 70E electrical safety standards for electricians require that you get retrained every 3 years, because they know that we're all human and that we forget things, and that we must take the time to invest in retraining and reinforcement of what we learned. As you guys see throughout this journey, someone must apply all sorts of different types of learning approaches to make sure that that individual learner learns the most effective way possible. But the question is, how do I blend, right? What is the right mix? Should I, have 10 instructor-led courses and then have that reinforced with just one online course, or should I give them 100 online courses first and then have them get into the instructor-led classroom after that? Really, my only answer I can officially give you is, ultimately the answer is up to you. And By you, I mean your employer, your company. What does your company care about most? What types of learners do you have in your company, right? How do the people in your company want to learn? This is where maybe you getting a survey together and surveying your company to say, hey, how do you want to learn? How do you want to get trained? I know this seems a little bit, um, peace and love, but it's true, right? Asking your people in your facility how they want to learn not only shows that you care about their development, but it shows that they have a stake in what they want to learn and how. And I can guarantee that'll increase the pace in which they're going to get those skills you need for them to run your facility more efficiently and at lower cost to you. To get the best results, it's really best for you to think up and create a program for them with a set, what we call curriculum path. So the best way to go about a blended learning approach, because it can get confusing. Do I take an online course next? Do I take instructor led? When's the next time I'm taking a course? When do I know that I have enough skills to do the job? That kind of thing. The only way to really know is if it's written down. I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm a huge stickler for writing things down, right? Talking about it is great, but once there's a specific action that needs to be taken, it's time to write it down. So it might be useful for you to create a curriculum path based on who you're working with, third party or in-house, on what style of instructor-led course versus online courses you want them to take, maybe simulations you want them to get involved in, or on-the-job checklists you want them to complete before they are ready for whatever job they're going to do. The curriculum path guides them through what they can take first, second, and third. And it'll give them the really recommended mix from the employer's perspective of what instructor-led or online or on-the-job training can be. And what's really great about curriculum paths is it can set a story. It can tell a story that will take that person from beginner to expert and let them know, if you invest your time on this level 1 stuff, you can be a level 1 technician. And then if you go to this level 2, you'll be an intermediate. And if you continue all these level 3 courses, you'll get to be an expert. And then from there, it gets to be really fun. You can really set up, a bunch of our customers at TPC have set up their own custom apprenticeship programs inside of their facility, right? You don't need to be through a state licensing board necessarily to be considered an apprentice. An apprentice is just someone who is learning technical skills for a trade for a certain application, right? And so in your facility, you can create your own mini apprenticeship program as long as it meets your state requirements, right? That can lead this person to pursue job title changes as they move their way through the curriculum. Maybe they can get certificates that will lead to maybe pay grade increases, right? You complete this level of courses, you can get a 50-cent per hour increase, or maybe, even better increase. And then job qualification. This is what I really want to spend some time on, is job qualification, that you complete Class A, Class B, Class C, and you complete this curriculum path we've set out for you. And once you do, then you will be qualified to do this job, right? But until then, you are not qualified to do this job until you finish these courses or until you meet these requirements for either on the job or instructor-led training. So my question I have for you, as we get into the idea of what it takes to be a qualified person, is, do you have a documented qualified worker program in your facility? Now I want to preface this question before I launch the poll to you, is documented, right? Do you have a sheet of paper produced for any of your employees, or for your coworkers for that matter, that can be documented to say, I am qualified to do this job and I am not qualified to do this job? And on top of that, maybe, do you have a list of requirements to say, okay, here's what it's going to take for me to be qualified for this job, and here's what my company requires for me to be qualified for this job? Okay, so that's kind of what I'm asking for this next question. Do you have a documented qualified worker program in your facility in any form or fashion? So I'm going to launch this poll, and you can only answer once. And if you're not sure, right, if you're hearing what I'm saying, but you're just not sure whether you have one, that's totally valid, because a lot of people aren't sure whether that is documented in their facility or not. And that's really a good action item for your facility. And so be honest with yourself and with me, because I think this will be really good discussion point for the next portion of this discussion. Okay, give you just a couple more moments. All right, let's go ahead and see what results we got. All right, looks like more people do not, that they know of, have a documented qualified worker program in their facility. Almost double the amount of people on this call do not have one to their knowledge, and about half as many do have that. So this is really, really important for our discussion here. And this is, it's okay. I'll start by saying it's okay for those of you who do not have one. It's okay not to have one, but it really does open the door for you to have some really meaningful discussions with your coworkers after talking, after having a chance to talk to them about this. One thing I will say, and I'm going to stop sharing these results to show you what I'm talking about here. This is what being qualified should look like. This picture we're showing on the bottom here. A documented discussion you're having with your supervisor, who is the representative of your employer, right? About, supervisor, what am I qualified to do, right? What am I not qualified to do in this facility? And that supervisor should be able to honestly say, okay, here's what you're qualified to do, and here's what you're not qualified to do in this facility according to our requirements for what it takes, right? Now, if that person says, well, you tell me, or what do you mean? You starting this job means you're qualified, or that kind of thing. That really starts some other great discussions you can have on. If the person says, hey, you're qualified to work on our electrical panels, and you're qualified to, work on a X and Y machine, if you just get up and say, okay, thank you, and you walk out the door, that discussion never happened. Okay, I want to say that again. If you sit down and talk with your employer about your qualifications, and then you walk out the door without writing it down, according to OSHA, according to all of our national standards, that discussion never happened. So the only way that you can really prove to OSHA or to yourselves that you have qualified people who are properly qualified to work on their equipment in your facility is that you write these things down. That can take the form of a couple different ways. A lot of ways, customarily, a qualification can take the form of a job description, right? Where the person coming on site, let's say the first day of the job, has a job description, and you sign them off to qualify them to do this thing. Or maybe you have, like we talk about, a documented curriculum path that they need to get themselves through before you can give them permission to be qualified. Or maybe certain employers might say, well, yes, I want you to take this instructor-led class, this online class, but also I want you to be in this facility for 5 years. I want you to have 5 years of experience here at our company before I consider qualifying you to do this technical job. Let's say work on our 480-volt electrical panels. So every employer will have their own set of requirements, and it's really up to that employer to set their requirements. What I will share with you now is, what does OSHA say about it? What does the national standards say about it? And we're going to open into the NFPA 70E standard when it comes to the idea of being an electrically qualified person to do live electrical work. And I think we talked about this. Being a qualified worker here is not a government requirement. But what I'm about to show you is the guidelines that they put in place for what it means to be qualified. Okay, but it's up to you to determine whether someone's qualified. And here it is. This is what OSHA tells us, and what NFPA 70E, National Standard for Electrical Standards, National Standard for Electrical Safety in the Workplace, tells us about what it means to be a qualified person. This person must possess skills, knowledge, and safety training pertaining to their job and working on those live electrical pieces of equipment, and how to reduce the associated risk involved with that equipment. Okay. So you might ask yourself, okay, have I provided my employees, or if you're one of those employees, has my company provided me with the skills and the knowledge and the safety training I need to be qualified? Right? And how about, do I have enough skills, or how do I know whether I have enough skills and enough knowledge or enough safety training to be qualified? there's only one person that can answer that question, or one entity that can answer that question, and that is your employer. That is the company for which you work. That is, for any person, average person in a facility, that person is your supervisor. They're the representative of your employer, and they can start having these discussions with you of, how many skills should I have before I'm qualified? How much knowledge should I have before I'm qualified? And how much safety training should I have before I'm qualified? But if someone who is supposedly qualified gets into a panel, or gets into a piece of equipment, or gets into a job and gets themselves hurt, okay, seriously hurt or injured, they'll be rushed to the hospital or to the clinic. But OSHA is going to knock on your door in most cases, and they are going to ask the employer what happened. Not the employee is not going to get in any trouble here. It's the employer, and they're going to say, did you properly qualify this person? And it's going to be important for you to say, with documentation to prove that you do have these qualifications in place. I just want to kind of end today's session by showing you an example of what this documented program can look like. And here's what a documented curriculum path can look like, let's say for this job title, which is a qualified electrical worker program. You can see it features on the top instructor-led courses, right, that this person can take for the different, and we've established 4 levels here that an electrical worker can pursue, along with the self-guided online courses that go along with that path. So I'm going to zoom in. I know there's a lot of text here because we want to make it fit on one page so people can print this off and use it almost like a college curriculum for this person to follow and check off and checklist. But let's say level 1, they're going to learn the maintenance fundamentals. They're going to take a class on the fundamentals of maintenance and how to be a good troubleshooter, troubleshooting essentials, right? And as they go about that, they're going to reinforce that training with some of the basic fundamentals that you learn in the courses above, but at your own pace throughout the next, following months after that class. Reading blueprints, reading schematics, metals in the plant, chemical hazards, troubleshooting skills. These are all online modules offered from our company in particular. And so you can see, okay, once you get through all these courses, that's about, several dozen hours of learning total. That will lead them to having a level 1 credential in that facility, let's say. And then you can follow this arrow to level 2. Now you're going to start learning the electrical fundamentals you need to be a qualified electrical worker. Basics of electricity, electrical troubleshooting, and advanced electrical troubleshooting. 3 different courses to take. Maybe you can spread these courses out over a year or 6 months or however you want that to be for that worker. And here are those electrical system courses online that you can reinforce this in the meantime between classes, right? Because you can't get people to classes all the time. You got to really schedule them out. Then you go through intermediate level, and this is where you can start employing some on-the-job training, right? And this is our format of on-the-job training, having a mobile platform loaded on an iPad that shows all your SOPs, all of your JSAs, all of your checklists all in one place that you can use to understand your machines and say, all right, I'm on extruder 1 and I want to understand how to open the valve on extruder 1. I'm going to click on the valve on the schematic. It's going to bring up a picture of that valve. I'm going to watch a video of how the valve works, right standing there next to the machine to see it in action. Okay, I'm going to walk through this procedure, walk through it with my mentor. This is where that on-the-job training can happen in our facility. Now, and here's the online training. Here's the continuing education. Let's say state licensing renewal you might need to get if you want. We offer that through Jade Learning, for instance. So there's all sorts of different blended learning paths we have here. One thing I want to indicate to you is this is a recommended curriculum path for that electrical worker. And what I mean by that is, if you personally believe that that person should be getting on-the-job training right at the beginning at level 1 instead of waiting till level 3, that's not a problem for us, right? You just move that over and you customize these to your fit. This is just kind of a template that you can start with for your own discussion and for your own benefit. And really, your facility might want to throw in some mechanical pumps courses into this because you think that your electrician should have that skill, or you add some, PLC related classes because you think they should have PLC skills on top of this. Really, these are all able to be customized and changed, and that's what really makes blended learning so fun, is that it's going to be adaptable to what your learners need and what they want. Just show you a couple other examples of this. An HVAC technician in your facility can follow this path where they start, guess what, with the same courses, fundamentals of general maintenance and troubleshooting essentials, just like the other people, but then they're going to their level 2 is going to look like air conditioning and boiler class and content online before they considered level 2 HVAC, and then level 3, and then they specialize. They offer specialization paths, options for them to continue their learning at the end of their journey. Here's a maintenance manager, so someone who's looking to get more on the people side of things. They can learn, planning and scheduling techniques, predictive maintenance and condition monitoring, how to avoid downtime in their facility, total productive maintenance, inventory control and management. And then they can start getting more technical specializations after that. And then finally, a mechanic type, right? And they start again with those fundamentals, but then they move into pumps and pump systems and hydraulics and pneumatics and plumbing instead of, the electrical stuff that these people had later. And you can see along these paths, they show milestones for when you should get a certification test. They show milestones for when you're considered level 1 versus level 2 versus level 3 in your facility. And they show when you employ the different types of training all together in one solution. So gone are the days of just having one type of training and calling it a day. People learn in different ways in today's world, and they want to learn quicker and more adaptable than ever before in today's age of blended learning. Okay, so I say as an action item, what can you do? Just try it out, right? There's all sorts of ways to try out these things for free. Okay, if you just use instructor-led training in your facility, try a free online trial to any number of these online training companies that offer online training. We offer a free online trial if you ever want to try just getting an idea of what online training looks like. If you use online training, just try registering one individual. That doesn't cost too much. It can be very cost effective just to send one person to a nearby hotel in your local city area to see if they get some benefit out of instructor-led training if you're only doing online training, right? Instructor-led courses, they offer that interaction, that hands-on learning, while online courses offer tailored training. So really create your own training list, create checklists, right? Try not to rely on tribal knowledge in your facility. Try to get documented checklists for your on-the-job training, and you can work with third-party companies to do that too. That's what we're in the business of as well. And finally, ask your people. Ask them, how do you learn? I know it seems a little bit strange to survey your own people sometimes, especially if you just got to tell them what to do, but asking for their input is the best way to gain their buy-in and have them sitting in these classes and sitting in these computer-aided sessions of their own free will instead of feeling like they're voluntold to do so, right? That's always a big issue for us. So without further ado, I think I'll go ahead and say, let's go ahead and chat some more. Do you have any discussions, questions that we can have? Let's get to our chat line and see if we can answer some of your questions about blended learning and the benefits of doing so. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ryan. As the questions start to come in, please go down to the bottom of the text box and enter in your questions that you would like to ask Ryan. But in the meantime, I'll just reiterate some of the things we went over at the beginning. Is that again, there'll be a survey at the end of this, so please do share your opinions and thoughts on this webinar and anything else that you want. But also, please, if you want a copy of the presentation or you need a link to the video, just let us know. We're more than happy to get that out to you. So right now, no questions coming in right now. Ryan, do you have any kind of closing thoughts or pieces of advice you'd like to share with the group?
I would just kind of close up to say, even though this is a free public webinar, I always say any chance you're getting to have some additional learning, try to think to yourself, what's an action I'm going to take? What's a discussion I'm going to have based on what I just picked up in this session? And so I really want to challenge you guys to say, what am I going to do? What discussion am I going to have? And I'll give you some great examples. How about I talk to my supervisor about, hey, what does it take to be qualified? Right? Do you have a documented list of what it takes to be qualified in our facility to do electrical or mechanical or machine operator or forklift driving or whatever it might be in your facility to be that qualified person, right? Do we have an apprenticeship program in our facility? Do we want to build one? That would be another great thing to pursue in this facility or in your facility. And if you're only doing one of the other approaches, I'd say, might it be worth trying out at low cost to us one of the other methods of learning to see if it'll work well for us? That's what I think would be great action items, and maybe you're coming up with your own, and I'd love to learn about those as well. Here's my contact info. Forgot to mention, guys, if there's any kind of more questions you have about the blended learning approach, or what instructor-led training is all about, what online training is all about, what simulations and on-the-job training should be all about, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. And actually, I love hearing from people who are out there doing this day in and day out in your facilities and what you're looking to learn. So feel free to reach out anytime, and I'm happy to do so.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Well, no questions came in, which means you must have answered every one of them.
Okay.
So I think at that point, I think we'll wrap it up.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.